We are back. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast. I'm your host, Isaiah. Welcome to episode number 281. And we are brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com, Summit Adjusters, Jim South Street, and of course, we are featured on HockeyHotStove.com, simply the finest hockey forum website out there. And if you go to HockeyHotStove.com and scroll down, you will see the insignia of the O&B Puckcast. Click on that link, and it will take you to all of our YouTube shows. And of course, right now we are streaming live on YouTube. And while you're there, if you could give us a subscription, if you could subscribe to our show, give us a like, we really do appreciate it. And of course, hit that notification bell so you can keep up to when we're having our live streams. Like right now, we're also live streaming on X and Facebook. So, wow, we were supposed to have a show for you last week. And unfortunately, the great Dan Silver, who unfortunately cannot join us tonight for the same reason. So busy with work and the holidays, everything's all compacted like the Flyers schedule, and couldn't make it. But here we are tonight after the Thanksgiving Day hiatus, and we're really glad to have you back tonight. And we got an action-packed show. We got so much to cover, and we have a special show announcement at the very end, so stay tuned. So let's get first thoughts from Chef B. What is on your mind tonight after a 2-week hiatus?
Well, I guess what's on my mind is, are they a real team? And they're hanging in there. Everybody's got their opinions, and now you got the whole thing swirling with Hughes and other players mentioned out there. So I can't wait to get to it, chomping at the bit. But another thing is, for all the viewers that are watching on the Chef Cave is officially decorated. So we are ready to go here. We are ready to go. So let's introduce our guest.
You got it. And our guest is a man by the name of Mike Fink, and he's from Hockey Hot Stove, covering all kinds of topics throughout the NHL and the AHL. And we're so glad to have you with us tonight, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. First time on here, but maybe it won't be the last. We'll see.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, if we just go by the article that you just wrote the other day on HockeyHotStove.com about the Flyers, what they are as a playoff team in front of our eyes right now, and how that's going to play out as the season goes on. I mean, that alone shows the kind of insightful writing that we have in spades at HockeyHotStove.com. Before we get going, though, I just want to remind folks about Summit Adjusters for people who have home damage, and we're coming into that time of the year where there's snow, there's a lot of flooding when it melts and all that kind of thing. You want to call Summit Adjusters before your insurance company. And Shep B, why don't you remind the folks why?
Yeah, because one wrong word can get you denied on your claim. They're professionals. There's guys that have been with the company and been doing this over 35, 40 years. And they're going to get you the most for your repairs. They know how to work the insurance companies. They know how to deal with them. And so basically you want to use them, call them before you call your insurance company. All right. They'll handle everything through you. Just basically sit back and let them do their stuff. They'll get you the most money for your repairs. So you give them a call at 215-752-0560.
You got it. The Flyers are going 4-3 since our last show. They're now 15-9-3 for 33 points through 27 games. They were just out of a second wild card spot behind the Rangers. The Flyers, though, have several games in hand on all their rivals except Pittsburgh. And, it's still early yet, and the Flyers have a lot of road games ahead of them. And we're going to kind of go through some of these topics with Mike. In the interim, since we did last talk to you, Tyson Foerster is out for about 2 to 3 months with an apparent shoulder injury. They haven't announced that officially, but that's what it sure looked like. Cam York is day-to-day with an upper body injury, and Ty Murchison has been called up to fill the void, a defensive defenseman who I guess we're going to talk about with Mike a little bit later in terms of what he's doing with the Phantoms and maybe why the Flyers called him up. But Mike, we got to start with that article on HockeyHotStove.com about looking at the Flyers and what's going well, but a cautionary tale, some things to look for, and some reasons why maybe they're not.
Yes, I mean, it's the Flyers are interestingly in a spot where it's like glass half empty, glass half full. How do you want to view the Flyers season? And I think because of the way the Metropolitan Division, the way the Eastern Conference is unfolded, you can look at things, say, all right, they're overachieving. They're taking the right steps, especially as a rebuilding team that they've been for a while. And Rick Tocchet has them Rick Tocchet, for all the criticism, has them playing above their weight. I think they're definitely playing a lot better than a lot of us expected. You can look at them and say, all right, the second half, they're going to be in that playoff mix and possibly a playoff team. Or you can say that they are overachieving and the shoe will drop or the skate will drop for hockey purposes and they're going to be in trouble. I mean, it's kind of the classic, like, American Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving is the measurement where if you're not in the playoffs, then you're not going to be in this season. I think it's more of, we're going to see by the holiday break, by Christmas, that time of year, which teams are really in it. I think you're really in that waiting out period now, but you look at some of the teams, I mean, really in their division, which helps their case, is the Devils are in a spiral right now. And people are saying, oh yeah, they're going to get Jack Hughes back and they'll be fine. They can really be in a big hole by the end of this month. And the Flyers took care of the Devils. Devils is a hard fought game, but they end up pulling away with that one. So you wonder, so there's some teams around them that are kind of either struggling or just not pulling away with the division to the point where the Flyers are still going to be in the mix. And I think another reason for optimism for them, I'll just stick with the optimistic side here for now, is you have the pieces to make a move, in the sense that you have the trade chips, or you have the assets to make a move. And a lot of these teams that are going to be in the mix, you wonder which ones really can make one and willing to. And the question is Danny Briere and Keith Jones, are they willing to maybe make that move to get into the playoff discussion? And is that enough for them? Do they maybe want to make a move that gets them into a cup contention conversation, and they'll wait this season because of that? So it's all interesting stuff, I think. And we're kind of waiting it out a bit now, but they are a little more optimistic, I'd say.
Mike. So, all right, Mike. So my question, at the beginning of the season, like a couple years ago when they were in it until the last day, I actually said that the team would be in it till the very last day and probably might even get eliminated the last day. And they were in that mix at American Thanksgiving, and they kind of fell out of it. Now this year, at the beginning of the season, I looked at this team and I went, if it, and give credit, and I keep giving credit to Dan Silver on our podcast, because he's the one that told us about Vladar. He had scouted him. He actually has him in his fantasy league, so he was the really one to put him on our radar, and you gotta love it. But I looked at that and I went, okay, let's just say he is a little bit better than Sam Ersson. And I thought, at the same merit that you just said too, that the other teams in the Met aren't really running away with anything. And I saw that to me. I said, oh my God, this team is a playoff team, simply by fact, not that they got so much better, but a lot of teams in the Met and actually in the East either stood still or they got a little bit worse, betrayed. So my question would be then, when we're talking about making those moves, like you just said at the deadline here, I'm looking at the other teams that could be in the race for this. And in particular, the Devils, you mentioned it, popped in everybody's head. Hughes wants to be with his brothers, maybe. You keep hearing that. Mathematically, looking at that roster, is that possible, in your opinion? Or where do you think, who makes the big move in the Met? Because I think whoever makes that big move in the Met is going to be the team that's going to ride a wave in the playoffs a couple rounds at least, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the division. You're wondering who is going to make that big move. It's also, which teams are really going to still be in it there. And you go one by one. There's some teams that you wonder if they also are going to decline. I think the interesting one, the Islanders, for example, where they are right now in third place in the division. I wonder how sustainable what they have going now is, because Kyle Palmieri's out for the season. John Gabriel Pageau's been out for a while. Romanov is out now. So the feeling's good around them now. You wonder if that's going to last. Sorokin has played well lately, so it's kind of helped them there. But you look around the division, and I think there's a lot of those teams that you wonder, okay, who's going to keep it up? But also, the thing I like to look for is which teams have the pieces to move, to make a big splash. And that's the first one. Sometimes it's salary cap, which some teams actually have, that they could take on a bad contract, which is something you want to monitor. But I look at the Capitals, for example, I know like people are mixed opinions on their farm system, but I think they have a better farm system. A little bit of that is slighted because of I watch a lot of the AHL and the Hershey team is
Yes.
got a lot of prospects there, but they're a team I think that I would keep an eye on the Capitals to see they might make a big move here, because especially if this is Ovechkin's last season or his last go at it, which it might be. I mean, we don't know yet. We're kind of circling that a bit. You wonder if they're going to make that big move potentially, and you wonder. I mean, the Hurricanes are always buying in, but you wonder how many assets maybe they have to move at this point. But I think they have cap space to do that. So they're a team that's going to potentially be buying. And the team that secretly might buy or might be under the radar is the Columbus Blue Jackets, where they're not going to make a splash move. They're not going to make that big swing. They're not going to make that big trade, but I don't put it past Don Waddell to make a quiet under the radar trade. Last season, I think he claimed Dante Fabro off of waivers. It was a very low key signing, but ended up paying off a lot because he was the type of defenseman Zach Werenski needed on his pair and helped unlock his game. So you're you're saying wait it out, but there's a lot of teams that are also you're feeling out which ones are going to move. But the teams that have the assets to make a trade, and then really the willingness to say, all right, this is our contention window, we're going to make a move now. The Eastern Conference as a whole, I think Montreal is a team that I have circled for that, because they're the team that has prospects on top of prospects, but a lot of those prospects, you look at them and you say, okay, where are they going to be on the roster? Or are they even better? Are they better than Demidov or whoever? And the answer for most of them is no. So, okay, at that point, you might as well, you probably are looking to trade them, especially if your contention window is open now.
Right. So, it is backed up. And one of the concerns I have, if you slant it a little bit more in a negative, is there's so many teams that are out of it right now that just if you look at the personnel, they have better rosters. There's just seemingly no way by the end of the season, if you just look at the standings, that a team like New Jersey or Florida or Toronto is that's its own little cluster F. I really don't know what to say about. I think they're in between the goaltending and Marner leaving and the kind of year that some of the stars are having, and the power play, everything's just kind of out of kilter or off kilter. So I still think, though, that these teams are going to be quite a challenge for the Flyers with some of the issues we're going to talk to, refer to in a moment, for them to hold out to at the very end of the season.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be those teams. Yeah, the Panthers, who are everyone has in the back of their head, they're going to make up the ground there, and I think what's interesting about the Atlantic Division too is you have all those teams that are wild card caliber type of teams. The Red Wings, you have the Senators, you have Montreal in there, and some of them teams are going to be in the top three as well in the division. And you have those teams here you have them in the Metro as well. So they're going to be in that mix. And the question, that's the other part, is that if you're a borderline playoff team, if you're in that a few points out by the trade deadline, what type of move do you make? Maybe it isn't such a big move where you're like, oh yeah, we're going to take a swing. The Flyers are going to take a swing, or whoever's going to take a swing, but maybe you get like another depth center or a depth forward. You add scoring to your third line or your fourth line or wherever it is, because or you add another defenseman they've needed. Those are the type of moves you potentially look at and say that they'll make, because they don't want to go all in, especially when you are still a rebuilding team and you don't want to trade away a prospect that ends up becoming something special somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Schiff?
So you mentioned the Red Wings, and I'll bring them up because they're kind of like in the same area of rebuild as the Flyers a little bit. It's very similar. You can draw some similar, likenesses to each franchise right now. My question is, I think Brière's got a little more, collateral, and his is trending more up. Now, Yzerman, and I mention this because the Red Wings are a potential landing spot for, they've been mentioned, let's just say, for Quinn Hughes. And the Flyers are in the mix and the Devils are in the mix. So all these teams that are on the cusp here are in the mix. And, I look at the Red Wings, if they're like the Flyers, if they don't make the playoffs, is Yzerman in trouble there? Is this Yzerman's last year?
What's funny is it's funny you mentioned that, because like when one of the things I actually do over the summer is I rank the rebuilding teams. I also sometimes do it trade deadline, but it's really like the summer is when I really dive into it. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, on Steve Yzerman to make that big move, to make that splash. A few reasons why, and one of them is because, they have missed the playoffs a lot, and I mean they haven't made the playoffs since I believe 2017-18, or even they have one of the longest droughts in the NHL, and there's a lot of pressure because Yzerman comes in. Everyone's like, believe in the Yzer plan, trust the Yzer plan. Everyone's like, he's the savior. He turned the Lightning around. He's gonna turn. He was the GM for Canada when they won the gold medals. Mm-hmm. He's just destined to come in and save the day. And it's been now, I think, 7-8 years we've been into this tenure, and they haven't made that progress. They've been a borderline playoff team each of the past 3 seasons, or definitely 2 seasons, where they're close but they're not there yet. And if you just for a brief diagnosis of the Red Wings here, they've got a lot of, we'll call it in baseball terms, singles and doubles when they need home runs. I think if you compare them to the Flyers, which is similar sort of in that they have been building it up for a while, it's that you have Dylan Larkin as a very good player. I think some people actually say he's a better center in the league, maybe a top 10 center. People are higher on him than others. But overall, if you were to say like every team, like where is he ranked usually? He's around the top 15 range. He's a good, not great player. And those are your core players. Him, DeBrincat, Moritz Seider, they're good, not great. They're not home run hitters. So when you have that, and then the other issue is Yzerman's not been willing to take that swing, not been willing to make that risky trade, whatever it is. And you look at, for example, Florida, when you get Matthew Tkachuk. You trade Huberdeau and Weegar for that, but then you get Tkachuk. So you look at a team like the Red Wings, are they willing to take that swing? And I think this season more than ever they are. The Flyers are probably going to be in the same situation, and I wonder if Danny Briere is also going into that. I'm not going to take that swing. I'm not going to make that big move, because eventually every rebuilding team has to make that big trade, and sometimes it flops in your face, and sometimes it's a bad move, but some of these teams, if you can make that big move, it doesn't necessarily need to be Quinn Hughes, but you're maybe looking at Tage Thompson could potentially be traded, or Rasmus Dahlin if Buffalo wants to trade them. And yes, you're going to trade a lot of pieces to make that type of trade work, but that's the type of splash that, again, you might have to make. And especially if you're a team like the Red Wings, who you don't have those home run hitters, those game-changing players, which the Flyers actually have a few have a few right now, and potentially in the pipeline a few also. So that's what's interesting about. There's a lot of pressure on Yzerman, I think, to make that move.
Quick follow-up question real fast. So okay, so looking at the Flyers roster, and let's just say Danny takes a swing. And I know you said, are they a playoff team? But if you really analyze it, you look through the whole thing, everybody pretty much, you got 7 teams that are playoff teams right now because it's all bunched up. So Flyers take that swing, they make the trade, they get somebody good, they get what they need or whatever. Does that change the dynamic? Is this team now legitimate? Does it take, is it 1 player away? Is it 2 players away? What is your opinion?
There are definitely a few. That's the thing. It's not like you're 1 player away as much as a few needs, probably, or a few positional, or a few areas to target. It's actually interesting because one of the things that we did like this mailbag last week, or we did a mailbag at Hockey Hot Stove, and one of the questions was, if the Flyers are in it, what type of move do they make? And there's mixed opinions about it, where yes, if you make a big swing, say you got Quinn Hughes, or I mentioned Tage Thompson. So say you found a way to make a Tage Thompson trade work. It doesn't solve all your problems, but it certainly covers up. It can cover up a lot of things. Where if you have a player like that in your top 6, then you have a dynamic top 6. It doesn't really matter that you necessarily don't have the depth scoring or really the you really don't have stability in on your third or fourth lines. And similarly, like Quinn Hughes or even or Rasmus Dahlin, where the defense as a whole is not great, or the pieces kind of you're plugging and they're trying to plug and play the pieces, they're trying to figure everything out there, and it's been a struggle all season long. But it does help with a lot of things. If you make a minor move, it's going to help a bit. But if you make a few of them, then it's okay. You're addressing a lot of these needs on your roster. So but at the same time, the question is, if you make a minor move in the big picture, then okay, you make the playoffs, but are you a playoff team that is going to get in and lose in the first round to a team? Let's say the Flyers get in as a wild card, and then they play. You could just insert team there. Obviously, a lot of teams are up in the air, but say they play the Capitals and they lose that series in 5. Where okay, how do you? And that's your team now. You want to build on that. You don't want to be that type of team that's what your ceiling is. So it's interesting because I also think like they're not going to think about this season only exclusively, because they know that more help is on the way, more prospects are coming, where they are still a rebuilding team, and you don't want to overreact to the season and make that big move. But at the same time, I think getting to the playoffs, actually, there's a little bit of value, not just value, but a little bit of importance for the Flyers, or more of a message to be close to the playoffs or in the playoffs, because it's been a while. I think the last time they made it was 2019, 2020, but they didn't even have fans in the stands. That was one of those crazy seasons where they ended the season early, played in the bubble. So there is a little bit of that feeling there where they want to get into the playoffs and send that message that this is a different era, and this is we're going to be a competitive team. We're going to push like the ways that this team historically used to before. We want to get historic about it. Like they used to be that team that would always push. It hasn't been the same.
We remember.
Yeah, I followed the Flyers.
Half the other groups of kids that listen to the show don't remember.
That's the big thing. Is like I've said about the recent years I've been doing the rebuild rankings. One of the recent things that I will say is that you need like competent ownership matters, or ownership won't win you a cup, but bad ownership could certainly set you back a few years. And I think with the Flyers, the reality is this team has not been the same type of team since Ed Snyder passed away. That's true. That's true. Like I know the salary cap has made things a little harder. All the rules that have made it, basically you can't stack teams, or you can't have the same
with
type
the
of team.
salary cap, though, I'll say this: it's for everybody. So you do what you want with it. More so, I think it is the owner who I guess, how do I say this? They doesn't accept mediocrity, and I think they settle for in a groove there for a year where all right, we're going to make the playoffs, maybe win a round, let's make money.
A great ownership can't. I don't think you can make the same difference it used to. That's why I think you could say like Ed Snyder's power as an owner like declined as like the league kind of balanced out a bit. It does make a difference in the sense like there are ways to cut corners, even in the salary cap league. There are ways to cut corners, and a lot of teams do that. You can like you travel around the league. I travel around the AHL. You could tell which teams in the AHL level cut corners where it's like, all right, the stadium's a mess, or the practice facilities are terrible, or they don't have the way the team travels. Like all those little things that owners can actually cut corners in a way, and that's where the difference I think is with the Flyers. With Ed Snyder, he would spend that little extra where he could. And you look at some of the teams around the NHL, the rebuilding ones that are more successful. They have that type of ownership in place. I think the Flyers that's another thing to keep in another layer is that they want to prove that this is a type of team that I know it hasn't been the same, but they can be the type of team that is competitive every year and tries to push every year, even if they're the roster wise they're not there yet.
To your point, there is no salary cap on scouting. Coaching, training coaches, skills coaches, all that stuff. And there's so much more that you can mention off ice, like the training facilities and all. So, all right. I agree with you there. So,
I wanted to qualify the statement when we talk about contender. We're talking about playoff contender, because you can't be a Stanley Cup contender until, you got to go through that phase where you're bankable as a playoff team. And now, where do you stand among the cup contenders? Where the Flyers, of course, aren't really close to that because they're not even bankable as a playoff team. So, just in case people kind of go, well, I know, Mike, you're going to be shocked about this, but sometimes Flyer fans, knee-jerk stuff. So just wanted to qualify that. So, a little bit. Now, you're talking to two guys. Chef's been following the Flyers more than 40 years. I'm at 55 plus years. So believe me, we remember what the Flyers were. I mean, they were the team that were always, of course, they're making the playoffs. I mean, ever since like 73 on. They had their a couple years, like especially in the late 80s into their 90s and all that. But then Lindros era, boom, and then 2006. But it's short, not sweet. But they come back in 2008, and then really since 2012, they just been just another team. And of course, that's what Briere and Jones are, were hired to change, right?
Yeah, I mean that's part of it. And when you bring in Ray and. But Briere really, I think when you brought him in, the difference between him and Chuck Fletcher is that he actually was willing to say, okay, we actually do need a rebuild. And I think the Flyers for the Flyers for a while, especially around 2012 range, the question is, okay, do they want to actually rebuild and tear it down, or are they going to try to stay competitive and slowly decline? You look at like some teams that have entered that where they keep trying to push forward, and then you just slowly are getting worse and worse, and all of a sudden you have no way out of that, really. So I mean, when Briere came in, I mean, interestingly, it was the first time they said, all right, we actually are going to tear it down. We are going to trade away some players. Like you look at you look at, I believe, it was a Scott Lawton. I believe they traded to Toronto, and you look at some of the players that they moved on from, where it's okay, yeah, we actually are going to create spaces for younger players on this team, and we're going to become a younger team. And I think, I mean, the one criticism I actually find this to be the criticism is that when Danny Briere came in, he kept Tortorella around, where my opinion on when a new GM comes and the coach is there, you start from scratch, you have a clean break, and you bring in your coach then, because eventually every GM wants to bring in their own coach. As much as they say, oh no, I like this person, or I was hired with this coach in mind, or this coach brought me in, they all want to bring in their guy. It just happens all the time. Even in Toronto, like Brad Trelevin came in and Sheldon Keefe was gone the next year. So I think your timeline is better when you bring them in at the same time. But now that Tocchet is there, I think things are they're at a better what you say, they're better off because he's there now. So it's
they're kind of in sync,
Yeah, they're in sync now. I mean, obviously, like it would be better to have them together at the same time. Like Briere comes in, brings in Tocchet, but this is a better. It's the better that now that you have the GM who brings in the head coach instead of the other way around, which does set your timeline back, because Briere was hired in the middle of the 2022-2023 season. So you're a few years removed, and you're still a few years away from contending because of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Tortorella really was the catalyst for starting a rebuild. He just came out, and if you recall that famous, what was it, December of 23, where he's saying we got to build this thing from the footers, and then Fletcher comes out, or I don't know, I forget who went first, and Fletcher comes out and says, well, we're only 6 points out of a playoff spot, So I think there was that divide, and the fact that it was Tortorella, plus their habits and the expectations of the team had just eroded to such a point culturally. The expectations of what it was to be a Philadelphia Flyer were really in the toilet by the time everything, Hextall just gutted their spirit. And then the other people like Dave Scott, more or less on down, just kind of like what you described earlier, well, we'll get in the playoffs and everything will be okay. And, I remember they did a power issue at the Hockey News, and Dave Scott spent about 5 minutes on the Flyers, and he spent the rest of the time talking about all the Comcast business ventures. It was quite obvious where his passion, would lie. Yeah. So, yeah, it was very telling. But I think, Mike, when you look at the Flyers and things to be concerned about, you look at right now, they're kind of struggling with the injury, the Ristolainen, and especially now with Cam York out, with that third pair, they may bring up Ty Murchison out of desperation. So that's one area that we're concerned. We don't know what Risto is going to look the last 2 years. He's been hurt so many times. And also, with Vladar, who's played so well, Yeah, but he's never played more than 30 games. Maybe you could expand on some of these themes as like a cautionary tale.
Well, that's the glass half empty part of it, which is that aside from goaltending is playing the way it has, where Dan Vladar is one of the best goaltenders in the NHL this season, which is crazy to think about, but he has been one of the best in the NHL. And Sam Ersson is, he has inconsistencies where he'll have a start where he allows 5 goals and you're like, okay, yeah, that's one of those bad starts. As a backup, he's a good backup. I think the issue for Ersson over the past few years is that they've had no goaltending. Not to be too harsh, but there was like goaltending that wasn't qualified for the AHL, and they had that in the NHL. So they were starting him 50 games or 40 plus games because they had no other option. And you see that around the NHL where you have these goaltenders that have to go 40, 50 games because there's nobody else to play. I think with Ersson as a backup, though, in limited starts, he's playing a lot better, and you're seeing it this season. I think the goaltending's really kept them afloat. You could say that if they don't have this goaltending or they don't have this elite play from Dan Vladar, that they are a bottom of the league team or the same team as last season. A lot of people have said that they are the same type of team in front of Vladar, in front of Ersson, but those players, they're playing great. Again, how do you view Dan Vladar, where he's only started 30 games in a season, or he hasn't started more than 30, I believe it was, or he's been a backup his whole career? Is either A, he's just kind of waited for this chance to be a starter, where he's been in situations where there was a clear-cut number one, and he's just backed up for years. A good example of that would be going way back, not way back, but you're going back a bit, is Cam Talbot, I think, started his career behind Henrik Lundqvist, and nobody really knew that Cam Talbot could start games because you're playing behind Henrik Lundqvist. So you're looking at Vladar, it's possible that's what's happening. At the same time, he's played a lot better, and you wonder if there is going to be this wall that he hits. I think that's why it's kind of what's been an interesting part of things is that Tocchet and the coach and everyone's started out the season saying we're going to split starts between the two, and they wanted to keep to a split, like a 50-50 split, but ultimately they've leaned on him a little more. They've leaned on him more so. So the question is are they going to overwork him? And then you hit March and there's no miles left on him. There's no gas left in the tank for him to finish the season, or be that this could be the version that nobody's really been willing to give a chance to, and they're the ones benefiting from him. It's also worth keeping in mind that goaltenders do take longer to develop, where now that he's at this age where I think he's 28 now, if I'm not mistaken, 29, where this is his prime. And these are the years where he can start those 40, 50 games. I do think, though, they are going to probably split starts with, or have Ersson play more, especially in these like back-to-back situations or 3 and 4s, which they've had a few of.
They got a rough schedule coming up. So I expect that too.
I mean, he's played 16 games and he's on track. I guess it would be like for 48 games if they kept with the same ratios, I guess, if my math is correct. So I think, that's 18 more games he's ever played. And I think when you look at Ersson coming off a really good start, and why does he play versus Colorado, for example? I think he sees that maybe, and I say Tocchet sees that Vladar might have been starting to leak a little bit of oil. And maybe he knows some things we don't know about. Maybe he's battling something, nothing that would keep him from playing, but you know what? I'm going to back off on this guy because we've got a really, condensed schedule. He's be mindful. He talked about the fourth line as well. He has guys that are tired, but why did he put the fourth line out there? And it's along the same lines. It's that with this condensed schedule, and then you have in goal, you have a guy who's never played that many games, and he's leaning. He admitted he leaned too much on Couturier. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you here. But he's mindful of all these things.
I think it's also worth noting that I don't think it's a coincidence that the game was at 12:30 or 1 o'clock start time, that Ersson's the one getting those starts. And I think throughout the season, I don't have the stats in front of me, but from anecdotal evidence, and I think you guys could agree, Urson's getting those 12:30 time starts, where if it's a back-to-back or it's really like they play a Thursday night and then they play that Saturday afternoon, Urson gets those starts, because those are the starts that you don't want to give your regular starting goaltender those type of games. You could give a backup and they'll be ready for it. And it's actually something that I think you're noticing a lot with what are good coaches versus bad coaches. And I know everyone has their opinion on Tocchet, but a very important thing to keep in mind is that great coaches these days, or good coaches these days, have to manage goaltending. If you want to compare it to another sport, it's like baseball of pitchers, where you have to manage your bullpen or manage your starter and manage your relievers, whatever you want to say. But these days you have to manage goaltending. And I think a big plus, you look at some of the other coaches around the league, like Chris Knobloch, for example, has been able to manage, especially in the playoffs, where he knows, okay, these goaltenders aren't going to carry me all the way to the cup. So when do I go with the backup, and when do I use the backup? And I think that's a big plus with Tocchet there. So that is something to help out there. I mean, he's talked about the other issues that have really that have come up, where you're talking about keeping your goaltending fresh, or the lines which keep them fresh. I think one interesting thing is one time he talked about, or he's definitely talked about it a few times, where because everyone's talking about Michkov's ice time taking a decline, and if they're not playing in normal games or regular type of games, there's not those situations to put him out there. Obviously, the big one is the PK, where if they're killing penalties all the time, then it's hard to put him out there, and it's hard to get him those minutes. And so it's been that adjustment too, where he wants to roll out basically the ice time for the lines pretty evenly, but then you run into those situations where you're killing penalties. Or another good example is you have the last change at home, you're on your home ice and you have your last change. If you have a lead, you don't necessarily want to put Michkov out there, because you want to match up, let's say, your defensive forwards against their scoring lines. A lot of coaches like to do that as well. So I'm talking definitely one of those coaches that will like to do that as well. So there's a lot of that too, that in-game situations where, okay, you can't play some of these lines, and ends up becoming a big talking point, obviously, in Philly with that in mind.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Chef, did you have anything to add with that before we move on to that?
No. Well, it can transition into it, because let's face it, with Michkov, since it's on the topic, and it goes into our next thing about penalties. I mean, he's taken a couple of bonehead penalties that have, and some of them, let's face it too, a lot of them are lazy penalties. Yeah. And also, it's a lot of the penalties I've seen calling, and this is a general blanket statement across the league, they've been weak. I don't all over the place. They're not really hooking penalties. They're not really slashing. Guys go down a little too fast. You've heard all kinds of stuff like that. For and against, even if I'm a Flyers fan, for and against my team, I believe that. So my question is, do you think that his times are down, and a lot of players, the fourth line doesn't get a lot of minutes because they're the fourth line, but also too, they're always killing penalties. So like Isaiah said, you think it's a system related thing, or is it just because it seems like that they're playing that box plus one and they're keeping everything to the outside? As a result, I don't see them chasing. I just see them having extra long shifts as a result instead. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with the penalties, because I mean, you mentioned Michkov, and I guess he's his own story there, but that is probably the downside to the Flyers, or to the way they play, is that they do take a lot of penalties. And I think what's interesting about, you ask any coach about the penalties, or you talk about, okay, what kind of penalties you want to take, and they're willing to take a penalty where, okay, it's a hard hit and they call that, or you take let's say a boarding penalty, okay, but because these coaches, they want to establish a physical play, the physical forechecking style of play. They all say the same cliche stuff, like we want to be a physical forechecking team that's tough to play against, all those type of things. But with some of these teams, that if you take that penalty, that it's the borderline call where, okay, it could have gone either way, but like, okay, it was a hard hit, or it was a good effort play, and they end up just calling the penalty. Those are the ones you want to take. The high sticking calls that you take, or the hookings, those are just poor penalties, that undisciplined plays. Some of that is, they are a younger younger team that does that will take those penalties, and you'll struggle there. And so that's a little bit of that. And I think also another thing to keep in mind is Tocchet's coming in and he wants them to, like, they'll take a few penalties, but at the same time that they are playing physically. I mean, the Panthers are that way where they will play that physical way. It's the analogy with like a team that checks hard and what's the name, that the borderline calls, the calls that could go either way, and the refs will sometimes call them and sometimes not. Mm-hmm. And you wonder, it depends on the ref, obviously, or whatever, is that it's kind of like the speed limit, and the speed limit's 55. Everyone goes 60. I mean, everyone drives over 60. So it's, if you can get over 60 and you're fine, okay, maybe some people, okay, maybe I'll go 65. At what point when you're speeding, are you actually speeding? But no one's going to say 60 on a 55 is speeding, even though technically refs are going to call stuff. They're not going to call everything. They're not going to call those borderline calls that can go either way. So those hard hits, sometimes they'll be a little strict just to send the message like, all right, we're like that person.
Like the hit on Zegras. That had to be called. I think that was because I think if that's not boarding in a major and he's out, I think that game gets out of hand really fast.
Yeah.
I think that's my opinion.
Yeah, and just on the Michkov note, I think what's interesting is something I thought about, because you're seeing it too, also with John Snowden as well, the AHL level, someone I've gotten to know more, is that with some of these coaches, obviously when you're a smart coach that has a lot of X's and O's, a lot on your mind, I think you sometimes are out thinking your players, or you're operating at a speed that's too fast for your players to process. And in Michkov's case, something that Tocchet actually has admitted is that there's a language barrier and it's hard for him to communicate. And something very important for Tocchet is that same thing you see with Snowden is that if a player messes up in practice, or a player messes up during the game, in practice particularly, he'll skate over to the player and one-on-one tell them what they did wrong, or try to give them instructions. And you're operating a certain speed. Sometimes your players are not at that same speed. It's hard for a coach that is like that to first of all, to slow things down or to connect with those players, and two, especially with Michkov, he play. I mean, it's a lot more. There's a lot more details here. There's a lot more details this season. A lot more stuff to process. It's harder for him. He has to. There's that extra layer there, and I think you see that as well with him. So I mean, that's I guess the learning curve that you're seeing this season as well. Just with those two, I think particularly because Tocchet is that type of coach where he operates a little too fast sometimes, because there's so many details there that sometimes you operate at a speed faster than your team can handle it.
Well, I think that it's something that Charlie O'Connor and Kevin Kurz just today talked about, how they actually changed the communications with Michkov. First, it was a couple of different coaches were talking with him, and now they cut it back, one coach a day, trying to just get the essentials to him so they don't overwhelm him. And again, I think it it's to your point that if it's not too fast for him, it may be just overloading and data dumping on him about don't do this, or please, make sure you do this, and so on and so forth. Chef?
So on that note too, I do believe that even with Michkov too, he overloads his other players on the shifts too, because sometimes he'll make a pass or make a play, and it happened several times during the Avalanche game, because I've noticed this, that when he plays the better teams, he elevates his game. He gets a little scrappy, but you've seen, like, he put a pass right. I don't know how it went in the middle, and it was a little bit behind. I think it was Andre at the point, and I'm like, how did he even see him? He was in the corner. He has this vision, and I think his mind. That's where I think, like, you need somebody like hopefully a Martone or is at that level that thinks that. I think Zegras thinks at that level. I think he thinks a little bit faster and a little bit like in a different dimension type of thing,
the processing is so more advanced,
It's a CPU. His brain's like a computer, and there's certain levels. You got like a Commodore 64 and, Nick Deslauriers, you got like an apple up here, and that's the Michkov, and they don't really play well together, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, you see that all the time also, I think. And I mean, for people who, with other sports, you could see it sometimes with like a head coach and a quarterback, where sometimes like sometimes the quarterback doesn't know a lot of the offense and they're trying to learn this complex offense. And okay, the coach has to really simplify things. And I think there is a little bit of that. I mean, that was a credit why Michkov looked better under Tortorella, because it was a simpler game and it wasn't something that it wasn't like, oh, you need to think so much. You could just react and you can just plug and play, or you can just kind of like pick up and you play. A lot of people talk about, like, let's say it was pond hockey or street hockey, but like there's not a lot of structure to the game, just a free flowing game. And there are some teams, I think, interestingly around the league, that they lean into that, where, okay, we're going to play that style as it is, just because we have all these players that they play best when it's like that, and that actually works out for them. But it's part of the adjustment. I think that's what I would say is that one of the things that for Tocchet he struggled with Michkov early on, because again, like, how do you connect those two dots, or how do you process, and why Trevor Zegras, so I think we're realizing is a lot more of a complete player than we thought he was, that he wants to take on that extra assignment, or wants to understand more about the game than I think people thought he was when they traded for him. But it's why he's a player that's playing well there. So I think there's a little bit of that disconnect. But I think one of the things you will notice with Tocchet is that he's not the type of coach that's going to be like, this is what I do, how I do things, even though he's an older coach, or he's technically a retread. It's not your typical retread where, okay, I've been around the league for a while, this is what I do, this is how I run things, and if you don't like it, then tough, because that's how I am. He's the type of coach that is going to adjust to the situations, or is going to adjust his style because of the players he has. So I think that's something that is going to be a plus. And I mean, it's certainly that's why it's certainly a plus. You notice it too at the AHL levels, that the coaches that, your roster is going to change. So if you can make those tweaks to your team, that it's going to make a lot of as big a difference as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a lot of penalties and things we've seen, I mean, they continue, and a lot of it's hustle. But I think certainly, like, the first month or so, it seemed to be system related. They were thinking out there, and if they're thinking, a lot of times you're not moving your feet, and as soon as you're not moving your feet, you're grasping, you're clutching, you're holding, you're hooking, and so on and so forth. So, so if I had to pin you down, Mike, and having read the article and enjoyed it, and I think you should check it out at hockeyhotstove.com, along with all the other fine stuff that Mike puts out. What do you think the Flyers are at? I mean, if we're March 30th, do you think they're still in the hunt, or do you think they're kind of fading away?
I think they're going to be in that mix all season. They're not going. What's interesting is they're going to be at the trade deadline, to the point where they'll probably be like 2 or 3 points out. And the question is, what do they do? And that's really what's going to determine how things unravel. And especially the way the season's unraveling, where they'll probably have, like, I don't know, 15, 20 overtime losses, enough overtime losses to make the points look a lot better than they are. But anyway, I digress on that. There's always that team that has like a bunch of overtime losses that is better than their record indicates. Another probably grain of salt with the Flyers. But anyway, they're going to be in that mix. They're going to be a few points out probably. But I think the thing is that if let's say they finish 5 or 6 points out of a playoff spot, is that a failed season, or is that a bad season? I don't think it is. I don't think it is. And I think they're going to be they're going to be interestingly in the mix. And I think the question, another layer to this, is which players maybe they call up because of that, or maybe if there's a player that has their season end in college earlier. I know the junior hockey circuit's a little different, where the schedule's they're on a different schedule. So you're not going to get a player from the OHL or the WHL to just come over, but you maybe, if the college hockey season ends in late March, early April, that maybe you see a player come in and then makes an impact there. And if they're ready to do that also changes your dynamics. So there's a lot to, I think, just kind of monitor to see, okay, how do they approach some of these things? And the question is, well, at what point, how is Danny Briere still going to stay patient? That's going to be an interesting question. I think it's something to really keep in mind.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Hey, so we wouldn't want to let you go without asking you about some of the changes that have occurred with Lehigh Valley, most notably the coaching staff, and finally a group of players that I'd say, let me see, I'd say about 5 of them that look like
Entertaining.
well, 5 of them that look like they're going to have some NHL time, and some of them will exceed 200 games.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely you get a feeling that this is a different type of team. They've struggled a little bit lately, but you get the feeling that they are a good team this season, and yeah, they have the right coaching staff. I think John Snowden, I've been very impressed with him. I've gotten to know a lot of coaches around the AHL, or gotten to talk to a lot of them, and you're very impressed with him there. There's a lot of there's a lot of the prospects there. You haven't had that a lot in the recent years, where I think almost a year ago to date, their best prospect in the system, or they're one of their best players, there was probably Emil Andre there, but otherwise it was, I guess, like Samu Tuamala was around. But now you're looking at their team, there's like 4 or 5 forwards that you like, that you could see a path for them potentially. You have some of the defensemen that some of them haven't been around, some of them haven't been healthy, I believe. So one of them just returned.
Oliver Bonk.
Oliver Bonk. Yeah, I'm like, why was I mixing up? I mix up Oliver Bonk and Alex Bump. It's like easy to
Yeah,
for some reason
Bump,
to, like
Barkey,
Bumper Bonk,
Anderson,
whatever.
the Killer Bees.
no, yeah, it's easy to mix up
Hopefully.
the names, but yeah, they got him back, and I think he was one of the players that was supposed to be around. I remember, like, during the rookie series, he was supposed to be around there, and they were like, "It's a maintenance day," or "Oh, we're just being a little cautious with him," and then ends up becoming like 8 weeks or 3 months. So he's back, and there's a lot to like there. One player I'd quickly throw out there, because I think people kind of don't really know, unless you watch a lot of the Phantoms, which I mean I've been able to do, is a player that you're not going to hear about a lot, but has been very valuable to them, is Christian Kyrou, Jordan Kyrou's younger brother, interestingly. And when they got him, they traded him. Samu Tuamala for Christian Kyrou was a 1-for-1 deal. Actually, he's helped both sides, because Samu Tuamala has found his footing in Texas with the Dallas Stars affiliate. They insert him on the defense, and he's just been a glue piece for them, where he's a good puck handler. He moves the puck up the ice well. He's a good player at the point. He's not a scorer per se, but he finds open skaters. He's got a great vision. He's a good skater as well, so he does defend well. He's been that glue piece that really has unlocked a lot of the offense, a lot of the team. It's funny because, like, a week ago, I would have been a lot more optimistic. They had a rough 3-3 where they only won 1 out of the 3, and now they're in that middle of the Atlantic Division now. But yeah, there's a lot more to like, I think, in Lehigh Valley, which is pretty exciting, because they haven't had that type of team. Really, they haven't had this type of team since they've moved back. So it's exciting to see in Allentown a team that could potentially be one of the best in the division by the end of the season, one of the best in the AHL at the end of the season, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we just cover a few of the players? I'm going to pick out some of the players. I mean, we can add them at the end later. Some of the other players that you think might have a path to the NHL. Alex Bump has played 18 games. He has 4 goals, 11 assists, 15 points, and he hasn't put the puck in the net as often as he would like, probably the organization would like, but he really has teamed very well with his teammate Denver Barkey. They're quite a pair to watch. What do you see with this player?
It's interesting with Bump, because they moved him and Barkey to the same line, and Lane Peterson's the one who centers, and Lane Peterson also just kind of like, he's a player that does it all as well. He's more of a veteran presence there, but between the trio, they've figured out that line works, and it's been their top scoring line since they put them together. And really what Barkey does for him is he brings out that motor. Barkey has that motor to play with. He plays above his weight. He plays hard every shift, and Bump kind of plays that way as well now, where Bump would, I guess, take a few shifts off, and now he's playing that way as well. What's interesting is that with Bump is that the question was, can he play a physical game? Can he play a game that gets heavy and slows down and he takes the hits? And this season, he's been able to prove that he does. He's getting to the dirty areas. He is scoring in multiple ways, not just as a shooter on the wing who just like finds an open look and takes advantage of it. He is making an impact a lot more this season, a lot of in various ways. So he's gotten a lot better. The question obviously is going to be, okay, well, what more needs to happen? I actually asked Snowden that a few weeks ago. I was like, okay, what does he need to do to get to the NHL? What more does he need to do? Because he's been playing great actually in the AHL, and it's really the big thing is the big thing's consistency for him, because that's the life of a shooter, which is, you know, when you have a good shot and you're scoring, you could score in bunches and then you could go cold for a week, and that's going to happen with him. So it is about just like proving, okay, yeah, I can consistently even if his scoring's not there, to still have the assists and still make plays for the other players. I think my opinion on this, and this is just what I would say, is he needs to prove, I think, he could score even if he's not playing alongside Barkey and Peterson, or he can drive a line more so even if he doesn't have those pieces around him. Because if he goes to the Flyers, and if let's say they called him up today or tomorrow, whatever it is, they'd put him on the third line, and there's not that same sort of help, I would say. I mean, really, the player's probably more talented, but in terms of like in that you're getting that extra help because the AHL level, that can he still play that way? And I think that he's not going to have the same chemistry and the same sort of pieces there that are going to help him. So I think that's something that's going to be interesting. And you wonder maybe at some point if the Phantoms would split things up. I don't think they will, because this is the line that's worked for them, so they're going to keep it together. But the question is, okay, can someone like Bump or can he play regardless of the situation, regardless of who's around him? So I think that's just, that's something to keep in mind. I was wondering if there were the other prospects you want me to just throw out there. I think Barkey's another one that's interesting.
Barkey. Yeah, he's 13 points in 18 games, including 7 goals. And I tell you, he's a defensive force too. Right? I mean, he had that steal to set up Gauthier. I guess it was the last game or the game before, and it's very, it's very typical for what he's known for. You know, his work ethic and everything.
It's that motor that really impresses you, where he plays hard every shift, and he's fighting for loose pucks, and he wins those puck battles. Something that's interesting, and something that like I would say I'd think about was sometimes we always just look up the hockey reference page or the basic hockey stat page, and it says like height, weight, and stuff. And I think what's interesting is not when you see like 180 or 160, sometimes you have to say not every 160 is the same 160. I mean, I'll just say like, my weight is not the same as someone else who would weigh the same, but is playing in the NFL or playing a professional sport. We'll just say that. So
it's composition, right?
So like, I would say with like Barkey is that he's a smaller player, but he plays above his weight, or he is built where he can win those puck battles. He can defend well, and him and Bump. Also, the other credit to that line is that they have great awareness, hockey IQ, whatever you want to call it, where they know how to defend well. And the Barkey will back check. He will defend well to stand out there. And I think you're seeing that as well. And what I'm trying to think of what else there is there, but something interesting is that if they were to call up a fourth liner, maybe I like to say they have a need on the fourth line to maybe call up a fourth liner. So maybe you're looking at someone like Devin Kaplan, who has shifted more towards that third or fourth line type of forward, where he's not scoring or not a playmaker offensively, but he is a defensive forward. So maybe you look at someone like him, but yeah, there's a lot of players to just kind of circle right now.
So, okay, I have a question. I want to go back to the Barkey for a second, because like I guess Dan on our show too has compared him, and I kind of agree with it. He's like Mike Richards in a sense that he's had success at every level he's done. He's made some kind of success out of it. And it's almost by sheer will and determination, and it kind of bleeds into his other players there and his other teammates on the line. Now, the last time a Flyers had a good duo come up together like that would have to be, I guess, Richards and Carter together. Now, is this a kind? And I'm not comparing them to Richards and Carter, but is there a type of duo that can come up and transplant themselves maybe in a couple years on this team and go, hey, we have that chemistry and we're going to play together.
That's something that I actually wrote about a few weeks back. One of my is like I thought, okay, maybe you should call them up together because you want to keep that chemistry intact. Because with the Barkey and Bump playing together, it's just been such a good combination that you maybe want to keep that chemistry together because they just work so well alongside each other. So it's something. I mean, it's harder to pull off just because of the roster spots available, and you just need a lot to happen for that to work. At the same time, it's something that maybe you'd consider just because, they have worked well alongside each other and they have formed that chemistry. I think the risk you run there is that if one of those players is ready and the other isn't, or one of those players that all of a sudden once they get up there, it's like, okay, they could stay, but the other one really can't. Then you kind of run into that issue. But I would consider that it's just something that's harder to pull off, I think. And I think that's something that you need the NHL spots available. And maybe it's something you look at maybe more towards the offseason where they could both have a training camp together where they had a training camp together this year, but a training camp where they are fighting for roster spots both together. And I think you could see that potentially happening. And until then, I could see both of them together at the AHL level, playing the way they are, and then you reassess things more at the end of the season, or you reassess things in the off season, especially since this at the AHL level, they're getting their ice time. And this is at this time this year, especially for someone like Barkey, I think, is getting that ice time just goes a long way, where he's playing a lot of minutes every game and playing in all situations. And you're going to do that in Lehigh Valley. You're not going to do that in Philly. So I think it's better to just keep them there. And Bump's the same way, because I think they could have called up. People were saying they should have called him up. I think it was when Forster went down. So they're saying call him up, but I think it's better. It might be better just to have him there. And I think that's something that
getting those minutes.
Snowden talked about a bit, where you keep him there this season, and it's not the worst thing that he stays in the AHL and just gets that ice time, gets those minutes, and works on those things. And it goes a long way there. I mean, it's kind of interesting because these players are going to stay there, and by the time they're on their way out, potentially at the end of the season, you have Jet Luchenko could potentially be joining them there, and Porter Martone, and you have some other people to keep in mind, like Jack Nesbitt, let's say. So it's interesting to just see how they'll juggle that as well. So just some stuff to keep in mind.
So what about goaltending? I mean, we've talked about a lot of the core players on the Phantoms. I mean, Kolosov has been a nice little surprise. It looks like he's adjusted. Bjornsson, he was the one I was curious about, because I thought of all the prospects coming up the pike, it looked like he was going to lead a little extra work, but that little bit of extra time could really pay off in his. I mean, he could have better results just by taking a full couple years down in the AHL and just refine everything. And I think it makes him, when he gets to the NHL, it'll make him stick.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is so far with Bjarnason, it's one of those where when he gets rolling, he's on, and we get rolling, he really looks good. But then it's life of a lot of goaltenders where they allow one goal and then all of a sudden they allow 5, and it's like, okay, that's just a rough start. You got to just throw that one out the window. And there are goals that you see sometimes where it's like, you can tell, he wants that one back, or he'll want that one back, and he'll probably do it as well. What's interesting is, I think keeping him in the AHL, the goaltending, it's hard to really figure out the timeline for that, but you keep him in the AHL, I think, this season. And I think the other important part is that Kolosov is your starter this season, so you you want to ease him into a starting role eventually. So I think you're probably looking at more of next season where he's the primary starter at the AHL level, and then you work from there. I think that's kind of the valuation on him so far, and really their goaltending, because Kolosov has been a pleasant surprise. And I think because the same thing, it's funny because the same thing's happening in the NHL at the NHL level too, where goaltending's been their strength. And a little bit of that, I think, when you see goaltending at an organizational level playing better, you wonder, is it really the coaching has had to play a role in that, where maybe, I mean, not just bringing in goaltending coaching, but having a defensive system, because if it's an organizational thing, you wonder, okay, they actually are helping out their goaltending a little bit more than the previous coaching staff did.
Yeah, funny you say that, because Ken Dillapal was the only one that made the cut out of all the coaches. So something to be said there. Isaiah?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think this year there's a couple of different dynamics at work in terms of, and something Jason talks about, Jason Martinez, when he talks about the Tocchet system is designed to cut off half the rink, so the goaltender only has to worry about half of the ice. So you don't have all that backdoor stuff that's been killing our goaltending for years, all the east-west. It's designed to cut that off. And the other thing that I think it is good is a seamless transition from Lehigh Valley to the Flyers and back, if need be, where they're playing essentially the same system. Not everything's perfect, but the same structure and concepts are in place. So it's easier for the players that are called up to hit the ground running. And you don't have that confusion where I do it my way, like you were saying earlier, like you would more or less talking about John Tortorella and his coaching. And then you have a free-for-all with Ian LePerriere, who Lappy's a great guy, and he played with his heart on his sleeve, and we love the guy. But as a coach, I thought he was really mediocre at best. And I think the whole organization is in a better spot from here on out. Tortorella was necessary. Lappy, I don't know if he was really necessary, but I think he was a decent assistant coach. But I think the Flyers are just better off, and they're at the next level, better prepared to take on prospects like Porter Martone and Jet Lachenko when he gets to the AHL, and do a better job developing them. I think that whole process, and Riley Armstrong into that bargain too, as well.
Yeah, they're definitely, I think I could say definitely at the AHL level, where they are more prepared to develop these prospects, and you're seeing it this season, where, I mean, it's not just the prospects, but a lot of players that are playing above their weight are playing better, having better seasons under the system, because you look at with Snowden and with Talk, there's a lot more detail, there's a lot more X's and O's involved, where there's a lot. It's not just when you see them bringing the puck up the ice, there's more of a vision or understanding of, okay, this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to do it, not just send it up and hope for the best, or chip and chase and hope for a scoring chance. There's a lot more detail. Interestingly, I actually asked Snowden about some of the stuff they practice. They say we practice a lot of rushes, a lot of rush chances, because it's something that first of all, they're good at. They have the skill to do it. But second, is one of those things that it's instead of just chip and chase and hope for the best to set up your offense, where they'll try to move players around to get those quick scoring chances on the rush, and you've seen it a few times where, let's say, Alex bumps skates on the wing where he has the puck, where he'll move to the boards to move a defenseman over, and that opens things up for someone like Peterson to get into the middle, or you have Barkey on the other end, or Barkey gets to the middle. They practice a lot of these stuff because they have those players, and also because it's more effective to really help set up your offense and really set up your team as a whole. And that you're noticing those small details in how they play that have gone a long way, which is why they've looked better, and really has helped with these young players, who, especially a lot of them who want to be able to learn these extra things or pick up these extra things, that it's helped with their development as well. I think the Flyers are, and that's the thing, the Flyers and the Phantoms, that they're in a better spot for when Porter Martone, whether he goes straight to the NHL or whether he goes to Lehigh Valley first. But even let's say he's the exception, where he's the player that's going to go to the Flyers. You're looking at a player like Jack Nesbitt, who will probably take a while to develop. He's a center who has to learn the position more, and he's not that elite talent you just slide him right away, but he's one of those more technical players who does a lot of the small things right. But a player like him who could spend a year or two in Lehigh Valley, and you're looking at maybe Luchenko will spend a season there, that they're in a better spot with this coaching staff, especially with Snowden there, to to be around. I think one thing I actually would caution against is if I were the Flyers to keep an eye on him, because there's a good chance coaches at the AHL level that who are this good, they get taken up by another team. This other team will put them as an assistant behind their bench. So just you want to keep that in mind in case who has impressed. There's a lot of AHL coaches who have impressed so far, really are exceptional coaches, I think, at that level. But to keep that in mind, because you don't want to lose him. It's interesting because someone like, for example, like Chris Knobloch was on the Flyers staff and they let him go to the AHL. They let him go to Hartford, and then he ends up going to the Oilers and he ends up doing a good job there. So that's just something to maybe monitor, because you don't want to lose a coach like that.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of wanted to wrap this up. We don't know a lot about Oliver Bunk right now. He just came, I think he played Saturday night. They didn't play him yesterday because he's just getting started. But one player that surprised us with the call up, although those in the know, and maybe you're probably among them, Ty Murchison, kind of like a defensive defenseman who skates fairly well and hits pretty hard, has been called up. And I think he's, in one of these cluster of games with the way the Flyers' third pairing has been playing, is probably going to get a chance. Well, did that surprise you, or did you see, elements in his game that said, he could be the guy leapfrogging some of the other players?
Well, I mean, it does feel like a situational call up a bit, because I think you see the same thing with the forwards where Forster goes down. Everyone wants Bump to be the player that gets called up, and they end up calling up. Now I'm trying to remember who they call it. I can't believe what?
Grundstrom.
Yeah, they call him Grundstrom, who's been around for a while. So it's it feels more of a situational type of call up. And I think the other part was we'll have him as our seventh defenseman, but then slide him in on that third pair. And I think it's also important to keep in mind is that we talked about ice time earlier, where he's the type of defenseman that it's easier to bring a player up and have them play that same sort of ice time, same sort of role, and keep them there. And I think it's something that the Flyers, I think, wanted to do there. So at first, it probably was surprised. I was like, okay, Murchison, I guess he's not the defenseman you think about, but then you look at the role that he's playing, and it kind of you're saying that makes sense. And I think that's something that you're noticing with the Flyers and the Phantoms, that they don't want to, as much as everyone wants Bump or Barkey to be on the fourth line, they're not going to make them fourth liners. They're not going to. That's not what they're going to do. They're very thoughtful or methodical in terms of who they're calling up, what role they're, let's say, plugging them into.
Yeah, gotcha. Shep, well, you'll get the last question from Mike.
All right. My question is this, okay? How close, I mean, with the systems between Lehigh and Nat now, would it make, what does it, because they're not going to pass, I guess, administration or regime or whatever you're going to call it, that Tortorella didn't really care. And the thing was, well, if they're professional players, if they got to be, they know what a 2-2-1 is, or, the system, they should know how to play each and every. All right. That being said, obviously it did make a big difference. So how close are the systems, and does it make it easier for Ty for him to, when he comes up, if he does get a play, and I guess he's has a little bit better range, so he might see a game against maybe San Jose or I guess Vegas this week that he gets in because he has a little bit more range. Does it make it easier for the transition for him in this case?
Well, I mean, definitely with the systems, they've been a lot more in sync. It's something, I mean, you've noticed it a lot with the coaching staff. I mean, with the coaching staff, obviously there are going to be some tweaks, I think. When you look at any AHL team, there's going to be some tweaks where it's like, all right, this is the roster we, for the most part, have at the AHL level, so we kind of need to play this way. You look at, that's something I actually talked to, I asked Todd Nelson about. Todd Nelson coached the Hershey Bears for a few years, and I asked him about, what some systems and stuff like that. And he said that 1 year we just didn't, I know the NHL team wanted us to forecheck. We didn't have the pieces to do it. So we ended up we played a different style. So you do have a little bit of that, but overall the teams are very much on the same page. And I mean, you could tell from the coaching staff down where it's how they approach the games and how the details that they kind of have. You you watch practice. I mean, again, like you watch, even if you watch practices, you'll notice with Tocchet where it's like that skating over to tell a player this is what you need to do right, which or he'll be on the ice early one-on-one with a player saying like, okay, this is what you need to do. And then you'll see Snowden, let's say, I haven't gone to as many practices as I probably should have, but anyway, where he's trying to get those extra details in. There's a lot of times where they'll go to the whiteboard and they'll draw up, okay, this is what we kind of want to see out of you guys, or this is what we want to see. And they're very much, the systems are in place to help with them. And I think you're probably seeing a little bit of that with the defenseman. I mean, everyone probably has their own opinions about players like Adam Yinning, who was called up earlier, or who's been a fill-in. You look at a player like Emil Andre, who has been a fill-in as well. There's some of these players that have gone up and down a bit, where, okay, yeah, they're not going to be like NHL defensemen, but they're still holding their own more so than I think other teams when they call up their prospects who are just like a duck out of water or something.
Sure. So, Mike, you've taken so much of your time on that. We really do appreciate it. So, why don't you tell the folks where people can find your work outside of Hockey Hot Stove, reach out on different social media platforms and all the like?
Yeah, I mean, you could find, the written work that I do, at Hockey Hot Stove. We cover the NHL, the AHL. I wrote up my weekly column last night, where basically I have just a bunch of, there's like, I call it the 5 observations, but really it's just kind of like, a lot of it is anything that's been on my mind all week. I'll just throw it out there and just put it in, especially at the AHL level, where I just have a bunch of random stuff that I'll be like, okay, let me just insert that there, or talk about that. For example, this past week, talk about the the Phantoms are 0-4 against Wilkes-Barre this season, and like 11, and they have a crazy split where the Pennsylvania teams they've struggled against, and they've been good against everyone else. But anyway, you can find me at Hockey Hot Stove. I write a lot of NHL stuff, AHL stuff, Flyers, just all the stuff there. I have my own podcast also. I have Ice Time, host it once a week, where we talk about some big ideas, random like general NHL stuff that are on my mind, or really that are worth diving into, that aren't necessarily news related, but just general topics to just think about. So you can find me there. You can find me on Twitter, Finks_thoughts. You can find me on Bluesky, which I don't know the handle for that, because like Bluesky, for some reason it's like BK. It's like
bsky.social.
Something like that. So I post the same stuff on Bluesky as well. You could probably, if you type in Mike Fink Hockey Writer or Mike Fink, you can probably find me there. I have the same profile pic, so it should be easy to find me with those two things. But other than that, the big thing is check out Hockey Hot Stove, and that's where you can find a lot of my work. It's been there since the spring. Actually, interestingly, the first time I met Bill was at a Phantoms playoff game. We're just so it's good. It's been good so far, and excited to see what we're doing there.
You got it, Mike. Thanks so much, and hope to see you again down the road very soon.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, you take care now.
All right.
Okay, well, Chef, before we get rolling and wrap things up, we actually have quite a lot of material. We're just we're going to riff on this, but I just got to remind people about Jim South Street, 400 South Street, 40 years of the finest cheesesteaks and hoagies in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. And you got to check them out. I know you want that food. It's just the best cheesesteaks, hoagies, and fries. And if you live down there, and you can't make it, of course, use Uber Eats, DoorDash, whatever it takes to get that delicious food right to your door. Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. All right, Chef, we have so much because 2 weeks have elapsed. Here's what I'm going to do. All right, I'm going to just say something, and you give me your feedback about it. And then at the very end, we'll give a special show announcement that I think is going to catch some people off guard. Other people, maybe not. So, all right. So the Flyers switched to a 2-1-2 forecheck after their break. And it showed, and I think it opened up some offensive opportunities, even if it left them a little bit more vulnerable, like Pittsburgh game, to some breaks going the other way. What say you?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think it was much needed because it was getting a little stale. They didn't really have much of a transition game by playing the other way. So what it did is, I guess the F2 or whatever, he was in a better position to turn when you got the puck. So I don't know. It lets you know hockey. I guess you know what I'm talking about. But I think it allows, and also too, what I've noticed too is the defense has been standing. They were giving the blue line a lot. Now they started leaning back towards that. Yeah, but when they were in that stretch there, that 3-game stretch where they were winning, they were confident. They stood the blue line, poke checking. The games that Grabenkin got in, because I know he gets knocked a little bit, but I thought he played pretty good, and he's been actually great along the boards when he has had the chance. So it's those little things, the stick play and the standing up the blue line. I agree with you there.
Okay, so Michkov has been used on the left wing. Now, previously, he's always played on his offside because he gets a better shooting angle. Rick Tocchet says, wait a minute, we need him to go north. He's already been maybe a little bit slightly slower, but if he can get another half step when he gets a breakout, and we saw that on that goal that he scored the other night. And who was that against? I forget which one. He had to break away. I think it was against Buffalo.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it because he didn't have to step back for the puck. He could take everything in stride because he didn't have to look back. And he kept asking Tocchet, am I going back to left wing? And he scored 3 games in a row or something like that.
Yeah. No.
And he's just kind of accepting it for now. I think eventually, as he has a greater grasp, he'll probably go from left to right, depending on the circumstances of the goaltender or who else he's playing with.
Well, you saw, and I think we tweeted about it, or on X, that he is really he's going to take the advantage of the Olympic break to get back in the weight room and kind of slim down a little bit, get his legs going, get back into better shape. You know what are you going to do? He's a 20-year-old kid. He got, played his first NHL season. He probably had a little fun this summer. Hey, hell, I had a little fun this summer. I came in about 9-10 heavy for the season, I get it, but I ain't got to skate up and down all night, and I'm not, but anyway, so that was said. I like the fact that he took ownership of that and said, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to be better shape. I'm going to be so I can make a better stand at the end of the season. Now, we saw this last year, especially with the way, Torts had played most of the season. And then when it took over, and Brad Shaw took over, it kind of was a little bit more loose, but the guys were gassed already. It was too much for them. They were the system, the way they were playing. So I think I think he's going to benefit, I think, a little bit from getting himself back in shape. I think, what I remember saying at the beginning of the season, the guy, man, his neck was so thick. I thought the guy hit the weight room, it wasn't, it was just an extra, maybe it was those extra cheesesteaks, but he said he's going to stay here this summer coming up. So that's a good thing. He's going to work out, on the off season. I just think it was good. It was good that he took ownership. He saw his problem. He's made corrections to his game under the tutelage of the staff, and I think they simplified things for him. So I think he's going in a good direction.
Yeah, and it simplified the communication, like I mentioned earlier. So that's certainly a move in the right direction. And also, I got to say this, 9 shots yesterday from Travis Konecny. But before that is an example of what we've seen all season long with probably the single worst puck management of any forward, certainly in their top 2 lines. I don't know what the hell he's thinking out there half the time when he gets the puck. It's like the hot potato. He throws it to when there's nobody there. He'll miss on a pass, or he'll just give it away. And it's really frustrating for a guy. And we're in year 1 of his contract. I don't know if that's getting in his head or what. And it was good to see him have a really good second half of the game. Yeah. But damn, it is. I cannot believe we're this deep into his career. Was he a 2015 draft? He was the second first round pick in 2015 at Provorov, and then Konecny later in the round.
It was 5 picks, five later, 5.
Oh no, he was much later. It was like 22nd or something, like maybe 17. I got to look. Right. Yeah, look that up. Go to Hockey DB. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also think you know what would solve this, and because it solved a lot of his problems that game too. Because what it did is it opened up more opportunities for everybody else. All you got to do, do you need to shoot 9 times at net in the second half of the game? No, but you know what? I will take the fact that if you take the 5 passes that you shouldn't have made and just put them at net, because when you did make those 9 shots on net before, look at the amount of opportunities that his line mates got. You know what I mean?
Well, they were the
there
best line yesterday, that's for sure.
Yeah, and they got so many. There were so many pucks just winging around. I mean, look, they didn't miss by much, and it could have been a different outlook, different result, or at least get to the third period as a tie. But that being said, I think if he just gets more shots on net, I think that solves Hans's problem, because not only that, he'll be producing for somebody else on his line, or a D-man who drops down to scoop up some garbage, because when he gets them, he's got a zing on them, and his shot. I've noticed that the goalies were leaving big rebounds on his shot. So I will say that. I think if he gets more on net, he'll elevate his teammates' play as well.
Yeah. Well, I just think he's got to, I think a lot of it is a product of him getting into the habit of being a perimeter player and not playing close to the net. He's skating around, but he's not doing what he really needs to do. And I think he has a decision to make, and it makes it a lot easier when you're close to the net. You just shoot.
Yep.
I don't know. It's a very frustrating player, but when you have the puck, when you've been a pro, and yes, he was drafted 24th overall in 2015. So for the people concerned about that, there's your answer. They got it right from hockeydv.com. So,
and what was Provorov was what, 7 or 11?
Provorov was number 7. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
right before the guy, we should have taken Zach Werenski. But anyway, so we move on. All right.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, his play has really been erratic, and it's just he's got to manage the puck better. Manage it like a veteran. Feel like, well, you know what? I got to set example for these kids. Yeah. This is a worst example imaginable. I expect him to do a better job with the remaining, 2/3 of the season. Okay. Here's the 2 things people want to know about. They want to know about our special announcement. That'll be last. But we got to talk at least a little bit about the rumors surrounding Vancouver's inquiry, according to Elliot Friedman, into the availability of Owen Tippett, and made some people, including some fools, that just assumed that Quinn Hughes is already asking out of Vancouver. That is not the case. There's no source I have that says Quinn Hughes wants out and he wants out now. No. What it has been said and suggested is that eventually, at some point, Quinn Hughes would like to join his brothers in New Jersey. And with 2 years left on his deal, a lot of people think, well, there you go. He's going to hit the free agent market, and Vancouver is going to be forced to make a move. And the question is, will they make a move in season now so a team can make a trade for him and have 2 playoff runs with him, supposedly? Or will they wait till the summer? Will they have more suitors, and the cap situation will put them in a better situation to ask for more and get more back, but it's only 1 year? Or will he just go to free agency? So what I'm hearing is that Owen Tippett was not necessarily included in a discussion about Quinn Hughes. That was a separate discussion. There's lots of chatter about what the Canucks might be looking for, and it looks like New Jersey and the Canucks did have a conversation about Quinn Hughes. Detroit may have had a conversation, and they would appear to be able to offer a center. Now, do they definitely need a center? The Vancouver Canucks, I don't know. They got Elias Pettersson. They're going to move Pettersson, and because what they did, Vancouver came out and said more or less that their unrestricted free agents are now going to be available. Give us a call. Let us know who you're interested in, what you'd be willing to compensate them with. Okay. So Vancouver reportedly asked about Tippett. Tippett is locked up with a limited no trade clause kicking in starting next year. It's a 10-team no trade list. Quinn Hughes, 2 years left to go. I mentioned that until unrestricted free agency. Also, Anthony DeMarco said that the Flyers would be willing to trade for Quinn Hughes even without signing a deal because they think they could flip him. So in other words, it would not be an obstacle, but I would assume, and I have to ask Anthony about this, that they would want to do it this season, not next season. They wouldn't want to trade him and then just flip him after 1 year. I don't know. They might want to have a chance to wine and dine him and maybe convince him to stay in Philadelphia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, and the news is breaking all the time. And I think a lot of it is put out there by the agents and other teams that are trying to muddy up the waters. And we're having our own little silly season around Quinn Hughes.
Sure.
Because there's so many teams that are together and in the playoff race, and there's not a lot of separation outside of teams like disaster teams like Buffalo and who else is in the tank right now? Let me just take a quick look in the playoffs. So I've been following disaster years. So
yeah, like
obviously
is still in the mix. Panthers are going to make
Buffalo,
a surge.
Nashville, Vancouver, obviously. Yeah. Calgary, maybe.
Around.
Yeah. Some of them are too close. And Calgary, I'm not. I think they might be there. Seattle, possibly. They have so many good young players. I don't know. I think Mike brought up something about where the Flyers are at right now. I think the Flyers, and we talked about this earlier in the year, the Flyers are at a point where they want to show improvement. Okay. And they're willing to make a move as long as it makes sense for the future. They'll trade it maybe even as high as a second for a Band-Aid for a need, but they're not going to trade a first for a Band-Aid. But I do think they're open to getting a Band-Aid if they're close to a playoff spot. But they're going to save their higher draft picks and other assets, prospects they have for more of a long-term player that would fit, that they could grow with as hopefully will become a cup contender.
I was listening to, who was it? I guess it might have been Bill and Jason today on Flyers Daily. And Quinn Hughes has the same agent as Danny did when he was a player. So there's a chance, there's a relationship there that will, we'll know right away. I don't think,
Percent, I think.
Yeah, it's not he's not going to burn Danny. I think they've become close friends over the years. So it's not going to be like, hey, look, you don't jump in on this or whatever, or there's a good shot possibility you could sign him long term, blah, 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 or whatever. I think that's what helps when you have like these players, not players, but Briere and Jones, they know so many people throughout this league. And I think that's where it's has been advantageous for them to build this roster and be able to bring players back to Philadelphia, say, hey, look, this is a good destination. This is a good place to be. So,
yeah, well, hopefully, I mean, we get a little feedback here from the audience. We always like recognizing people who chime in if it's relevant to what we're talking about here. So at Heinrich, 4956 wants to trade Tippett and Drysdale for Owen Power in Buffalo. Too much.
You think that's too much? I think it's too much.
Well, it depends what you think of Owen Power. Is Owen Power the second coming of Bob Daly back in the late 70s, early 80s? Is he that good? If he is, I'd have to think about it. But if he's just a soft, bigger player who will always leave you wanting more he is right now,
I'd have to see more. I'd have to see more. Talk to me at the trade deadline. I'll keep an eye on him. But as of right now, I probably wouldn't go that route.
Yes. Well, at least Miller Brad chimes in with, this is the best management we've had in place in a decade. I think that so far, especially defining moves like getting Michkov and also trading for Zegras. That's the real big trade that Danny's made that made sense.
And don't forget, he got 3 number one picks out of Provorov. Who else? He turned Provorov into a pick. He turned Lawton into a number one, and somebody else. I'm missing one. Was it Hayes?
No, I don't think it. No. They had to.
I forgot. Well, he's gotten all these picks. He's got the collateral. So yes, I agree. I agree with Miller Brad.
So as far as I know, the Flyers are going to be in the mix to try and get Quinn Hughes. I would imagine they would want to do it this year if they can. It depends on what happens in Vancouver. it looks like Vancouver is definitely getting rid of their UFAs as much as possible. Kiefer Sherwood is somebody whose name's been bandied about. But if you go up and down the roster, if you go to Puckpedia and look at all the UFAs, there's really nobody in Vancouver besides Quinn Hughes that I'd be interested in. And I don't know. I mean, Elias Pettersson seems a little flighty. I don't know if he's a Flyers kind of player. The talent, I mean, he's been a 100-point player.
Yeah.
But the whole thing with although I got to admit that with the Rangers, their captain hasn't exactly ripped it up, JT Miller, and he hasn't put a lot of shine on him. And maybe that means Elias Pettersson was on to something, because JT Miller is not impressed. He's got 18 points, 7 goals, 11 assists in 29 games. But I've not heard some good things with JT Miller. Maybe it's just a transition back to New York. I don't know.
Who knows?
But what that means for Elias Pettersson as a possible acquisition or a consolation prize instead of Quinn Hughes for the Flyers.
Going to Detroit, Isaiah.
That's
where I think that's a good landing spot for him. I think that system they play will work well with him, I believe.
Is Tage Thompson a good enough center, like defensively? Because he's not playing center right now, I don't believe.
I don't think he is either.
I don't know.
I like his shot. I like his skill.
Oh, yeah.
I really do. Is that the need right now? Because look what you got coming. What's more important? I just say this. If you're asking me to focus on somebody, if I had to say, all right, I'm focusing on that number 1 D, I think we said it with Anthony DeMarco last show. That's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to worry about the D first, because I think we have enough adequate centers and wingers. It might not be a true number 1, but the true number 1 D is going to be a hell of a lot harder, and that takes twice as long to grow. So,
all right, I think the Flyers are still at a point, however, where if you have the opportunity to get what you think is a number 1 center, and it's not a done deal that he necessarily is, but if they think highly enough of him, instant offense, instant improvement on power play, just a shooter right away. You can imagine Zegras feeding him and Michkov behind the net or on his off wing, just amazing things that could happen. And then you're filling a 1C spot if they think he's good enough. So it wouldn't be the worst thing, but
that would be my backup plan then.
Yeah.
I would go for the D-man first, and then if that falls through, I'd be like, all right, give me something to make the fans and this team excited, like, okay, we're going for it. So you start with the D-man.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get him, Quinn Hughes, Darlene. That was not really I'm not going to kill Darlene on that hit on Zegras. It was a penalty. You could even possibly say it might have been a double minor, but they're going to call that a major more or less every time. So,
and like I said, that's so the game wouldn't get out of control, because he comes back in that game. There's, you saw the way they reacted when they thought he was hurt. They were, all the little guys on the ice were going crazy, So, but anyway, all right. So is it time for our big announcement?
Yeah, I think so. It's time for a big announcement. So we have tried to, in our 9th year here with the O&B Puckcast, cover the spectrum. The great Dan Silver is someone we value very much, and he's had a tough time over the holidays and all, but he'll be here, right? And I mean, unless he calls us tomorrow and say, "Hey, see you later, guys. I got a great offer to make $100,000 on this podcast, and goodbye." Okay, but I hope not. No, Dan is a real prospect guy, and I'm a big believer that we want to talk about the team day to day. And there's shows that cover and sweat the details on each and every game. That's not what we do. We kind of, when we're on our usual schedule, we come to you every 3 or 4 games on a weekly basis and discuss what we saw and what's happening, and like we have tonight, and we take a bigger picture view. One of the other things, beside the prospects, is having someone who's an insider, someone who can tell us, who has relationships with scouts, with front office people, not just in Philadelphia, but also around the league. And it just so happens that we had the opportunity to get someone who is a regular who could be a regular on our show, and the aforementioned Anthony DeMarco from dailyfaceoff.com, from here on out, on most of our Monday shows, will be a regular contributor.
Yes.
He's going to have like an insider segment. Sometimes when Dan can't make it, he might be a full panelist with a guest. But one way or another, we're going to see a lot of Anthony DeMarco. So he's at DeMarco25 on X. And he has great information, and he has some takes that people may agree with, may disagree with. But regardless, he's been consistent, and we're really thrilled to have him. And it kind of fills that niche of having the insider. We have a prospect guy in Dan, and then you have people like myself and Chef that have been following the team for 50 plus, 40 plus years. I'm trying to give you the People's Podcast because, you know, we love doing this, and I've been following this team since 1969, and we just want to do the best for you, and we think it's going to make a better O&B Puckcast. What say you, Chef?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you've been around and you've hung with us since the beginning, we had Anthony for a little bit of a stint before. He was on a lot of shows at the beginning when we first started this thing, and the chemistry is there between all four of us. It's like, I guess, and I'm sitting in the Chef Cave, the pub in the basement, and that's the atmosphere that I like to try to bring. A couple of guys shooting the shit, drinking a couple of pints, talking about the game and hockey in general. And I think that's what we're trying to bring to everybody, and I think it works.
Yeah, I hope so. Our listenership, especially since we went to YouTube and with some of the live streams, has really picked up, and we really do appreciate it. So, so that's the announcement. We're going to see more of Anthony. It might not make it every show, but most of the Monday shows, we're going to see Anthony, and we're supposed to do a show the next 3 Monday nights, and we'll see what happens. So, look, with the time off, we didn't have a chance to go through each individual game, and I can only say, I just wanted to mention one last thing, since we did talk a lot. Emil Andre, in my opinion, was not only the best Flyer on the ice. I thought it was his best game as a Flyer when you consider the competition and how the Flyers, really wanted to show something. And this is a measuring stick game, even if Colorado was coming off of, on its third game in 4 nights or days or what have you, and the Flyers had a break. Still, I think it's notable that he played with no fear, and it was really great. He made very few mistakes that the Flyers couldn't live with. So congrats to Andre, and I hope he keeps it up. At the very least, he'll be a trade chip for a player like Dahlin or Hughes, or maybe that'll make them feel comfortable.
Tippett, Hughes in a first. I know it's not as if you're in the Flyers community, or it's not Haig in a third, but it'll do.
Yeah, it'll do. Yeah, you got to talk to that the deadlifter. You got to get Mikey on here to get his opinion. Yeah, good guy. Yeah. So anyway, all right, we're going to wrap it there. So Chef, let me get your last thoughts, and we'll give people the send off.
My last thoughts is, they're going to catch up in games with the other teams that they're hanging around. So we'll have a true, as of after next Tuesday's game, we'll have a true standing of where they are in this lineup, whether they sink or swim. They got Sharks, Vegas, and back-to-back with Carolina.
Home and away.
Who's that Tuesday game next Tuesday? Who is that again?
No, we got the Sharks tomorrow night. They host Vegas on Thursday. They host
and the
Carolina.
Canadiens after that.
Right. And the Canadiens is on the Tuesday after. But we're not going to worry about the Canadiens because we will be back next Monday, hopefully. And
we'll have a better idea to tell you where this team's at by then. So that'd be great.
4 games.
Hey, if you want to argue or dispute me or any of us guys, you can hit me up on X at Chef to the left B on X.
You got it. You can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck at O&B Puck. Also, you can follow us there at that address on Bluesky as well. We're not real active on Bluesky. We post our shows. We post Lyle at Specters, and occasionally I'll throw some comments. We're mainly an X heavy, type of show. We do have a Facebook page, and of course, we're on YouTube. And you can follow the O&B Puckcast on several podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, and of course, YouTube, Facebook, like I just mentioned. Just type O&B Puckcast and it'll pop right up for you. And if you could follow or subscribe, whatever applies to your platform, we really do appreciate it. It moves us up the charts when people are looking for a Philadelphia Flyer podcast. So, well, that's it. I hope you are pleased with the announcement. I know we are. And that's all we have for you tonight. Thanks for listening. And until next time, everybody, take care.